Department of Justice, Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services, CTAS Purpose Area 1 webinar. My name is Christina, and I will be your moderator for today. Our presenters today are Ann Beeman and Melissa Harrington from the Department of Justice, Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services, and our panelists to help today will be Matt Lizakowski, also from the Department of Justice, Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services. Starting the webinar today will be our first presenter, Melissa Harrington. Go ahead, Melissa.
Thank you, Christina, and Happy New Year, everyone. And thank you very much for your interest in CTAS Purpose Area number 1 for 2020. The COPS Purpose Area number 1 provides funding for 2 activities. You may apply for hiring of law enforcement officers and/or equipment and training. And we will go through both of those activities during this webinar. All materials that you would need to apply for our application can be found on the Tribal Justice website and also on our website. Our website or our home page is www.cops.usdoj.gov, as well as www.justice.gov/tribal. The materials that will help you prepare for your application this year includes the solicitation, and also this year is new, is called a quick start guide, which is really a step-by-step guide on how to physically apply. We also have frequently asked questions available on our webpage. There's also fact sheets. There's also our allowable and unallowable cost list as well. So everything that you will need to apply for our application are on those 2 websites, and we encourage you to do so. Specifically, what's new for Purpose Area number 1 this year is that startup agencies are eligible. There are 2 focus areas that we would like you to focus on or to help your projects focus on. And this year, addressing missing or murdered Indigenous persons is one of the goals, as well as addressing human trafficking. Of course, the overall goal for Purpose Area 1 is to address the most serious tribal law enforcement needs, to increase your capacity of your agency for a safer community, to prevent, solve, and control crime, to implement or enhance community policing strategies, to engage in anti-meth or anti-opioid activities, to also engage in strategic planning, and again, addressing MMIP and or addressing human trafficking. Another new item this year for folks who've applied before in the past, under Purpose Area number 1 this year, hiring awards are going to be for 5 years, and equipment and training awards will remain at 3 years. If you're interested in hiring a civilian for a civilian meth and or opiate coordinator, those positions will remain at 3 years. Also, we updated the funding caps because of the limited amount of money. We're trying to spread the wealth, and we will discuss the funding caps throughout the webinar. But in general, we will allow up to $500,000, $700,000, and $900,000. If you are awarded a hiring grant, you are required to do a background investigation as well as complete basic officer training for those hired officers. And also for all Purpose Area 1 awardees, regardless if you received a grant before, you must attend our annual CTAS new awardee orientation. Also, as a heads up, we are trying to streamline our application and make it more user-friendly for you, specifically for our narrative questions. In the past, there were a lot, I guess, but we tried to streamline it this year, and we do have less narrative questions to help you hopefully address your narrative in a shorter time length. So we are limiting our narrative narrative format to be up to 8 pages. Also, this year, the timeline question was in the narrative last year. The timeline now is taken out of the narrative, so it's its own standalone document that you need to submit. And the timeline this year, you will include for each requested purpose area the timeline, but in one standalone document. And you'll also do the same for the abstract as well. The tribal authority this year has been eliminated, except if you are applying as a tribal consortium or tribal designee, you will still need to submit the tribal authority. We also made some updates to our budget worksheet. Again, if you're applying for a hiring award, you will notice that the budget worksheet will reflect 5 years for salaries and benefits. And we also grayed out the bigger narrative box, but we will discuss that and we'll go see the screenshots to show you. So you can expand your narrative in the item narrative description box, the first narrative box, versus the bigger one. But we'll show you a screenshot to explain. But we tried to make the budget worksheet a little bit more user-friendly as well. The goals for Purpose Area 1 are to address the most serious law enforcement needs, to continue and to enhance your community policing strategies, to engage in strategic planning for law enforcement, to prevent, solve, and control crime, engage in anti-meth and anti-opioid activities, and address missing and murdered indigenous persons as well as human trafficking concerns. You have to be a federally recognized Indian tribal government as determined by the Secretary of the Interior to apply. This includes Alaska Native villages and tribal consortia consisting of 2 or more recognized tribes. If you have received a Purpose Area 1 grant before in the past, you're more than welcome to submit again this year. You're not ineligible. We opened CTAS 2020 on December 4th, and we closed at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on February 25th. We have about $24 million. We hope to fund as many as we can. That might be approximately 40 awards. Again, the equipment and training awards are to be provided up to 3 years or 36 months, and for hiring up to 5 years or 60 months. Again, due to the limited amount of money that we have available, we are going to provide funding based on your sworn force level, and that's based on your budgeted sworn force. And we will allow up to $500,000 for a sworn force of 1 to 10 or 0 to 10. A sworn force of 10 to less than 20, we will provide up to $700,000. And a sworn force of 20 or more, we will allow up to $900,000. Under the hiring activity, again, this is hiring of full-time. We only provide full-time funds for sworn career law enforcement officers. Again, under the hiring, you may also request money for, and you should budget for in your budget worksheet, background investigations for the newly hired officers, as well as the basic officer training. As I mentioned earlier, the civilian positions, there are only 2 that you could apply for, and that is an anti-meth or an anti-opioid coordinator. Those are the only 2 civilian positions that we fund under Purpose Area number 1. The rest are all sworn law enforcement. Separately, if you're interested, you can apply for our second activity, which is the equipment and training portion. This list that you see on the screen is not all of it. Again, please go to our COPS webpage or our Tribal Justice webpage, and you can see our 2020 allowable and unallowable cost list. It's not an exhaustive list, but it does give you a good breakdown of what we're currently funding and what we're not funding. These are some examples under equipment, such as uniforms, police cars, patrol boats, for technology, computers, radio upgrades. For training, again, anti-meth, anti-opioid training. For training, again, if you're asking for officers, please include the officer basic training. Also include the required CTAS awardee orientation that everyone must attend. And that will go under travel. All Purpose Area 1 awardees must budget travel for attendance to the new awardee orientation. We suggest that you budget for at least 2 staff members and use DC as a location and use GSA to gauge your estimated costs. But please include that in your travel on your budget worksheet. Again, also anti-meth and anti-opioid activities, public awareness campaigns, those two can also be on your budget worksheet. Overtime costs are also eligible this year for sworn officers engaged in community policing. Please review our solicitation as well as our FAQs. We also have a cap on overtime costs, but in general, a sworn force of fewer than 10, you can request up to $25,000 in overtime costs. A sworn force of 10 to fewer than 20, you can request up to $50,000. And a sworn force of 20 or no more than 70, or more than 20, you can request $75,000. But overtime costs as well is an eligible item. And with that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Ann Beeman, who will continue with the presentation. Ann?
Okay, great. Thank you, Melissa. Now let's talk about the budget information. Now, we highly encourage you to use the budget worksheet template. This is highly recommended. If you're applying for indirect cost, please clearly state that the indirect cost is being applied to and submit supported documentation. Now, a signed current indirect cost agreement must be included at the time of application, or it must be noted in your budget narrative that you never received an indirect cost rate. If the rate agreement is expired at the time of application, then you should be able to demonstrate the negotiation with the Interior Business Center for a current rate should be in progress. Now, I want to add a special note as far as when it comes to breaking out the fringe benefits. Now, for agencies that do not include fringe benefits, such as your vacation, your holiday leave, and your different shift differential, part of the base salary and typically should be calculated this separately. The allowable fringe benefit should be included in Section B of the Budget Detail Worksheet. Any fringe benefit that was already included as part of the agency base salary should not be listed as duplicative requested line item on the budget worksheet. Now here, we have some links for reference material for Purpose Area 1. Feel free to use these if needed. Now, on the budget detail worksheet, there are 9 categories. However, the Cost Office only uses 8 of the categories. We do not do construction. Now, when you are filling out your worksheet, please refer to the 2020 allowable and unallowable list for further items. The budget detail worksheet should provide the detailed computation for each budget line item, listing the total cost of each line item and showing how it was calculated by the applicant. For example, cost for personnel should show the current negotiated annual salary for an entry-level officer with reasonable anticipated increase in year 2 through 5 for hiring. In addition, please list the appropriate year total for each allowable fringe benefit that will be paid by the agency for this salary. The budget detail worksheet should present a complete itemization of all proposed costs. These should be linked clearly between the activities and the proposed items included in the budget. The Purpose Area 1 CTAS Budget Detail Worksheet was recently redesigned to be more user-friendly and to reflect software updates. You will find more instructional language throughout the worksheet. You want to look for the red triangle. You want to hover your mouse over it, and this was there are numerous areas that the budget worksheet has carefully have information for you at your fingertips. You are strongly encouraged to use the workbook, but when completing your proposed budget, and fill-in versions are available for download. An applicant that chooses to use a different format should ensure that all budget and demographic information requested in the provided workbook is included. The budget detail worksheet, the budget narrative, and the demographic form will make up 15% of the applicant's score. In your budget narrative should thoroughly and clearly describe every category of expense listed in the budget detail worksheet. DOJ expects proposed budget to be complete, cost-effective, and allowable. The narrative should correspond with the information and figures provided in the budget detail worksheet. The narrative should also explain how all costs was estimated and how they are relevant to the completion of the proposed project. Applicants should demonstrate in their budget narrative how they will maximize cost effectiveness of grant expenditures. The budget narrative should generally describe cost effectiveness in relation to potential alternatives and the goals of the project. For example, a budget narrative should detail why planned in-person meetings are necessary, or how technology and collaboration with outside organizations could be used to reduce costs without compromising quality. The narrative should be mathematically sound and correspond with the information and figures provided in the budget detail worksheet. The narrative should explain how the applicant estimate and calculate all costs and how they are relevant to the completion of a proposed project. The narrative may include table of clarification, purpose, but need not be in a spreadsheet format. As with the budget detail worksheet, the budget narrative should be broken down by year. If an applicant is applying as a consortium, aggregate the data for all the tribes represented in the application. An application should identify the application as being from a consortium and list the represented tribes in the appropriate section of the demographic form. The budget detail worksheet, the budget narrative, and the demographic form submission will be rated based on the following criteria. To the extent which the application includes all of the requested information, the extent to which the budget is reasonable, and that all costs in the budget are linked to the activities described in the purpose area narrative. The extent to which demographic form is complete or explanation is provided for missing information. The budget worksheet personnel section. Now, in the personnel section, you should select either a sworn officer or a civilian position. You're going to enter the current negotiated annual salary for an entry-level officer with a reasonable anticipation increase in years 2 through 5. Compensation paid for employees engaged in grant activities must be consistent with that paid for similar work within the applicant organization. Now, for sworn law enforcement officers, the definition, of a sworn law enforcement officer is a career law enforcement officer who is authorized by law or by state, local, or tribal agencies to enforce and oversee the prevention, detection, or investigation of violation of criminal law. Approved entry-level salaries and fringe benefits are newly hired or rehired time-sworn career law enforcement officers, including village police safety officers and background investigations for newly hired officers' positions. Now, as Melissa mentioned, there are only 2 types of civilian positions that you can apply for, and that will be the civil or civilian methamphetamine position or an open-door coordinator position. Salaries and fringe benefits for a methamphetamine or open-door coordinator may be requested specifically to address methamphetamine or open-door issues within the tribe. These are the only 2 civilian positions that you can apply for. All newly hired, additional, or rehired officers or equal number of deployment veteran officers funded under Purpose Area 1 must engage in community policing activities. The Purpose Area 1 budget worksheet will assist your law enforcement agency in reporting your agency's current entry-level salary and benefits and identify the total salary and benefits requested per officer position for the length of the grant term. You need to list the current level base salary and fringe benefit rounded to the nearest a whole dollar for and 4 times sworn officer position within your agency. In the budget narrative, include a description of the responsibilities and the duties of each position in relationship fulfilling the project goal and objectives. Do not include employees' contributions. For agencies that do not include fringe benefits as part of the base salary and cost, typically calculate these separately. The allowed expenditures may be included under Section B, Fringe Benefits. Any fringe benefits that are already included as part of the agency base salary should not be included in the separate fringe benefit in Section B. For more information about allowable and unallowable fringe benefits for sworn officer positions requested, you can refer to a website, www.justice.gov/tribal/. All requested information must be included in the budget detail worksheet and budget narrative. Now also, let me remind you, there's a retention requirement. Applicants requesting funding for hiring must plan to retain grant-hired officers for 12 months after the expiration of the grant. The retention requirement does not apply to civilian methamphetamine or open door coordinator positions. Okay, this section is a screenshot of the personnel section. Now you want to select the appropriate button to choose sworn officers or civilian positions. You're going to enter the number of positions requested. Enter the negotiated annual salary for an entry-level officer in year 1 with reasonable anticipation of increase for year 2 through 5. Your fringe benefits. Fringe benefits should be based on actual known costs or an approved negotiated rate by a federal agency. If not based on an approved negotiated rate, list the composition of the fringe benefits, packaged by individual line items. Fringe benefits are for the personnel listed in the budget category A and should be reflected of the benefits that all other employees of the agency receive. All requested information must be included in the budget detail worksheet and the budget narrative. The approved negotiated rate for fringe benefit must be current within the application submission. There are 9 fringe benefits listed by name. You will record the amount of each line item that your agency contributes in addition to the salary. Enter the appropriate total for each line item for each year based on the year's salary. Vacation and sick leave cannot be listed twice. If you offer your employees the ability to accrue vacation and sick leave in the base salary, you should not include a separate total for them in line items. The other category can be used to include items that are not listed by name, but are considered allowable costs. And please feel free to use our allowable and unallowable cost list. Provide greater detail about the item that you have requested in the narrative section at the end of each category. Vacation and sick leave cannot be listed twice. If you offer your employees the ability to accrue vacation and sick leave in the base salary, you should not include a separate total for those line items. Okay, now I will turn it back over to Melissa.
Thank you, Ann. The next category under the budget worksheet is travel. For travel, you want to describe the purpose of each travel request in reference to the project objectives, show the basis of computation, show the number of trainees, the units of cost, identify the location of travel, if known or if unknown, indicate to be determined. The budget should include the estimated cost again for travel to attend the new awardee orientation. Please budget for at least 2 staff members to attend a 3-day meeting in Washington, D.C. Here is what the screenshot looks like for travel. Just for everyone's reference, the little red flag over travel is where you will find helpful information such as definitions or just further information to explain what each of the categories are. And in the item narrative box, which I'm hovering over now, is where you're going to include all your information. You're going to explain the what, the where, and how much for each item requested in the item narrative section. Please input all of your information in that section. Again, you want to describe the purpose of each travel request and provide greater details about each item that you're requesting. The next budget category is the equipment category, such as uniforms, bulletproof vests, basic issue equipment, etc. You will use the budget equipment section to do so. Applicants that do not have an information gathering system compatible with the FBI Uniform Crime Reporting System, you are encouraged to apply for funds to pay for the NIBRS UCR compliant crime data system through our office. Again, with the equipment section, you want to explain how the equipment is necessary for the success of the project. Also describe your procurement method on how you went about figuring out the cost for these requested items. Again, you'll be entering your explanations, your descriptions, your quantities, what you need in the item narrative section. Here's a screenshot of what a budget worksheet equipment category looks like. You'll go into the appropriate button to add equipment or delete a request. You'll enter the equipment cost accordingly for each item. You'll indicate whether your organization will use your own capitalization policy for the classification of equipment. Remember that we define equipment as a useful life of more than 1 year with a fair market value of $5,000 or more. Again, we are going to say this more than once, but refer to the allowable, unallowable cost list to give you some guidance on what items we will fund. Again, you want to provide greater details about the items that you're requesting in the item narrative section. And for those who have received awards before, if you have any questions about the disposition of your previous awards or your previous awarded items, feel free to call our response center to speak to your grants program specialist if you have questions about the disposition of your older equipment. And the response center phone number, just for everyone's awareness now, is 1-800-421-6770. And if you have questions about the CTAS 2020 application, you can call or you can email us at tribalgrants@usdoj.gov. The next category in the budget worksheet is supplies, and we've defined supplies as expendable items that cost less than $5,000. Those items typically should be in the supply section. Those things could be items such as uniform accessories or binoculars or books or handheld tape recorders as examples. Again, you want to list the items, the budget, and include all the information in the item narrative section. And there's a screenshot of that. The next is contracts, which you will see here. And feel free to go to our homepage as well for fact sheets on sole source justification and consultant rates. We have fact sheets on that. We encourage to promote free and open competition in awarding procurement contracts, and a separate justification must be provided for sole source procurements in excess of the simplified acquisition threshold currently set at $250,000. But procurement contracts are listed in the contract section of our worksheet. And again, be aware of the sole source justification requirements of over $250,000. And here's our budget screenshot for contract section. And for consultants, we do allow consultants. And for each consultant, you'll enter the name if known, the service to be provided, the hourly or daily fee that makes up an 8-hour day, and estimated time on the project. Consultant fees in excess of the DOJ grant-making component's maximum rate for an 8-hour day currently is at $650, will require additional justification and prior approval from the respective DOJ grant-making component, and that is not only the COPS office, but OJP and OVW. If you have anything beyond $650, you would need prior approval from each of the DOJ components. Again, with all of the requested items that you're putting on the budget worksheet, whether it's personnel or equipment, please make sure you include detailed information, the who, the what, the why, the quantity, the costs, and item description, and be as descriptive as possible. And again, this is a screenshot of the consultants. If you are requesting any, this is the consultant section. And again, anything over $650 per day will require prior justification. And I'll turn it back over to Ann.
Okay, the other cost category. Now, the other cost category is used for items that do not fit in the other budget categories as we have previously discussed. Now, items such as overtime and/or background investigation. List any items that cannot be classified as equipment or supplies. All requested information must be included in the budget detail worksheet and budget narrative. You will be entering all information in the item narrative box. Okay, here's a screenshot for the other cost. Now, in the other cost narrative, that is going to be grayed out. You will have to enter your information, the item narrative. This is where you're going to enter your information at, because the other cost of the big box is going to be grayed out. And again, as we said earlier, just refer to the allowable cost list for guidance on what can be requested. Overtime costs are eligible for officers engaged in community policing activities. For 2020, there's a cap on overtime costs based on your sworn force. The caps are for sworn force of fewer than 10, no more than $25,000. 10 to fewer than 20, no more than $50,000. Sworn force of 20 plus, no more than $75,000. Indirect costs. Now, indirect costs, an applicant with a current federal approved indirect cost rate must attach a copy of the rate approved. If the rate, if you don't have the rate, but you can show that you have applied to the business center, please attach that documentation. The narrative for any indirect cost should clearly state which direct cost the indirect cost agreement is being applied to. All requested information must be included in the budget detail worksheet and budget narrative. In order to use the de minimis indirect rate, an applicant would need to attach written documentation to the application that advise DOJ of both the applicant's eligibility to use the de minimis rate and its election. If the applicant elects the de minimis method, costs must be consistently charged as either indirect or direct costs, but may not be double charged or inconsistently charged on both. In addition, if this method is chosen, then it must be used consistently for all federal awards until such time as the applicant entirely choose to negotiate a federal approved indirect cost rate. This is a shot of the indirect cost. Now, you can type in the indirect cost narrative here. You will be able to type here. So please list your items that you are applying your indirect cost rate to. You're going to enter the current indirect cost rate as listed as the approved negotiated indirect cost rate agreement. You enter the amount that will be used as the base. Identify the direct costs in the budget that will exclude from the base as required by the IDC agreement. Use the narrative section to adequately describe the items that make up the space. Review and understand the rate type that has been approved on your indirect cost negotiation agreement in order to apply it correctly to your budget request. Identify the direct costs in the budget that will be excluded from the base as required by the IDC agreement. Use the narrative section to adequately describe the item that makes up the base. Identify the direct costs in the budget that will be excluded from the base as required by the IDC agreement. Use the narrative section to adequately describe the item that makes up the space. Review and understand the rate type that has been approved on your indirect cost negotiation agreement in order to apply it correctly to your budget request. Now, what happens if our tribe does not have a current federal approved indirect cost rate at the time of application? Indirect costs are generally allowed by the applicant who has a current federal approved indirect cost rate. You need to attach a copy of the federal approved indirect cost agreement rate to the application. Specifically, a copy of your agency's most current signed federal approved negotiated indirect cost rate agreement must be included with your application. If the rate agreement is expired at the time of application, then you should be able to demonstrate that negotiations with the Interior Business Center for a current rate is in progress. An award recipient without an approved federal indirect cost rate must be unable to recover funds budgeted by indirect costs until rate is approved. The recipient will need to provide the awarding office with an updated agreement in order to begin recovery of funds for indirect costs. Now, please note that in our FAQs, we have direct information about the indirect cost request, because if your agency is awarded, the COPS office will freeze your IDC costs until you can provide a current IDC rate. And here you have your office contact for the COPS office. We have our phone number listed and our email address. And also the response center number is listed. And then if you need to send an email, you can send it by email to travelgrants@usdoj.gov. Feel free to reach out to any Purpose Area 1 contact if needed. And remember, the deadline is February 25th, 2020 at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And good luck to everyone applying. Thank you.
And with that, we'll take it back to Christina.
Great. Thank you, Melissa and Ann. We do have our first questions, and the first question is, we are unable to find information specifically how to apply for a startup grant. This information is not in the funding announcement or the quick guide. Where is that information?
Sure. So you will apply just like everybody else, in that you will submit the narrative and the other required elements. And essentially there's an FAQ that references establishing law enforcement services, and that is question number 23. Can my tribe use funds to establish a new or supplement an already existing contract for law enforcement services? Funds awarded under the hiring portion of Purpose Area 1 may be used to establish a new contract or supplement existing contract for law enforcement services. Only federally recognized Indian tribal governments may apply. So essentially, you're just going to submit an application just like anybody else. You'll submit the narrative, you'll submit the timeline, you'll submit the profile, and your budget worksheet. So you apply just like anybody else. You don't have special instructions.
Thank you, Melissa. And to follow up, they also want to know if they would fill out, was the demographics form one of the forms that you had listed before? They want to know if that's also needed.
Yes, and my apologies for that confusion. So for being new, you would not know this, but so our CTAS budget worksheet has the demographics form attached to it. So for all Purpose Area 1 applicants, you'll submit the CTAS budget worksheet, and then you'll see the demographic form as part of that. And that lists your unique characteristics of your agency. But yes.
And I would just add and clarify that just complete that form to the best of your ability. Some of the questions may not apply, like how many officers do you have? You would just put in 0 for those if you don't have any current officers. If you have information that maybe you might be able to obtain from BIA or your local law enforcement agency that's currently providing the services, as far as the crimes that have occurred or the calls for service, or that type of information that we ask for, please feel free to answer those as best as you can with your existing information.
Great. Thank you, Melissa and Matt. The next question is, are tribal probation officers included under this grant?
We fund sworn law enforcement officers, and we define a career law enforcement officer previously in our presentation. I'm sure that some officers have multi-roles or jobs, but overall, we're looking for sworn career law enforcement officers that engage in the suppression of crime.
Great. Thank you, Melissa. And the next question is, go ahead.
I can quickly try to find the standard definition.
Okay. The definition of a career law enforcement. The COPS office statute defines a career law enforcement officer as an officer hired on a permanent basis who is authorized by law or by state or local public agency to engage in or supervise the prevention, detection, or investigation of criminal law violations. That's the definition for a career law enforcement office based on the COPS office definition.
Thank you, Ann. And the next question is, how much funding is my tribe eligible to receive under Purpose Area Number 1?
Sure. So if you have a sworn force of fewer than 10 sworn officers, you're eligible to ask for up to $500,000. Tribes with a sworn force of between 10 and 19 sworn officers are eligible for up to $700,000, and tribes with a sworn force of 20 or more are eligible for up to $900,000 in COPS office funds. Again, there is no local match. It is 100% federal funds. If awarded for a hiring, it is for 5 years or 60 months. And if awarded equipment and training grant, it's up to 36 months or 3 years.
Excellent. Thank you, Melissa. And how much overtime can I request?
For overtime, for a sworn force of fewer than 10, no more than $25,000. For a sworn force of 10 to fewer than 20, no more than $50,000. Sworn force of 20 plus, no more than $75,000.
Excellent. Thank you, Ann. And the next question is, can you explain more about funds provided for basic law enforcement training?
Sure. You're more than welcome to go to our 2020 allowable and unallowable cost list, where we provide some general training classes or training ideas for you that you can request. But in general, it's any type of training that you will need for your law enforcement. So it could be basic officer training. It could be training at in New Mexico or the State Academy training. It could be NIBRS training or human trafficking training, whatever type of training that you're interested in seeking for your agency. And then the specific thing that we need you to do or budget for training is that as a awardee under the CTAS Purpose Area Number 1, you are required to attend the new awardee orientation, even if you did receive an award from us before. And in that training section of the budget worksheet, you will submit that you are attending and you need travel costs to attend the new awardee orientation, which we feel is a training request.
And for the basic law enforcement training, I'll just add that for attendance of that, things that would be covered are registration costs. We know at the BIA Academy there might not be any cost to attend, but if there are costs at a state post, if you're sending your officers there for basic training, or if there are travel and per diem costs related to attendance at basic training, those can be covered as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Melissa and Matt. And it looks like we have another question, and that is, in the past, parts of the salary and benefit costs were able to be placed into the non-federal contribution column. This is not open on the workbook. How can we access this?
Right. The objective is to not use the local contribution, but rather use our budget worksheet to budget for 100% federal funding for the salaries and benefits for the requested officers. You're more than welcome to put in the budget worksheet that you would like to contribute to your local, if you want to do a local contribution, but in order to receive salaries and benefits, you need to request 100% full-time entry-level sworn officers salaries and benefits. It can't be partial, or you can't say we're going to contribute 25% beyond that. You need to request 100% full funding for the salaries and benefits for the personnel. And since we don't have a local match requirement, that's why we purposely grayed out that section.
Thank you, Melissa. And the next question is, previously, tribes applying to start a law enforcement department had to submit a resolution to this effect and have a line item budget for this initiative in their tribal budget. Is that still required? FAQ question 23 does not provide much information. How many startups do you hope to fund?
Great question. And the first part of that question is, that is correct. We no longer need you to be submitting a letter and also indicating that you have an operating budget. Startup agencies are eligible this year. As we mentioned earlier, you would apply just like anybody else and submit to the best of your ability regarding the demographic form, the data questions that we ask. We don't know, but we hope that having the second part of that question is, we don't know how many startup agencies are interested, but we hope that we could provide this opportunity now, and hopefully more can join us.
Great. Thank you, Melissa.
I was just going to piggyback on your the contact for the grants management JMS Help Desk. That's if you're having problems uploading your attachments to the GMS system. If there's any technical problems that you're facing while using the grants management system, the DOJ grants management system number that Christina mentioned is who you should contact. You will contact the response center if you have a question for us or any of the purpose areas regarding if something's eligible, or if you have a question about it programmatically. That's the response center. But the JMS Help Desk is primarily the technical questions or glitches that you might be facing. And also on that note, just a reminder that the deadline is February 25th, and please take your time with the application. I'm not trying to rush you, but we do want to encourage you to try to submit, if at all possible, earlier rather than later. Even though, you know, we live in a technology world, things might happen and things might crash towards the very end of the application period, and you don't want to worry yourself of whether or not things didn't get put in. So hopefully you can submit sooner rather than later. It's very unusual and few and far between of us accepting applications after the deadline. So you just want to try to do your best and adhere to the deadline. But if there are any technical issues beyond your control, please contact the grants management system, the JMS Help Desk, as soon as possible, especially towards the as we get closer to the end of the application period. And like Christina said, the GMS service desk is open 24 hours, 7 days a week. Again, 1-888-549-9901 if you have any technical glitches.
Thank you, Melissa. It looks like we have a couple more questions.
Okay.
That is, would a recreational travel trailer be allowable for purchase for a ranger position? And it's noted that this trailer can serve as a law enforcement / ranger station in mountain areas on a reservation or other remote locations.
You're more than welcome to submit that. Again, you can refer to our 2020 allowable and unallowable cost list. Specifically, I believe we do have trailers listed. I'm just trying to go to it right now. But again, feel free to take a look at our allowable and unallowable cost list, and you're more than welcome to submit what your needs are and just justify it. We do provide ATV, UTV trailers. I don't think that's the same, but we do. You're more than welcome to submit and justify the need for the trailer for the ranger.
Thank you, Anne. And there is a question on the applications. The question is, applications can still be submitted on grants.gov, correct? The discussion on GMS is confusing.
So for CTAS, specifically Purpose Area number 1, you will submit your application through GMS. All applications go through GMS.
Excellent. Thank you, Melissa. And Melissa, Ann, or Matt, do you have any additional information that you would like to share?
The user guide, which is our new document this year, could assist that person who just asked about the confusion between GMS versus grants.gov. The user guide literally is the step-by-step on how to apply. So we strongly encourage you to go to our homepage as well as the Tribal Justice homepage, and the Quick Start Guide literally tells you step-by-step on how to apply. And it is all through GMS. And please apply.
Thank you, Melissa. And do any of our panelists or presenters have any final comments to share?
Nope.
No.
We're good.
If anybody has questions beyond Purpose Area 1, if you want to call the Response Center number, if you have other questions besides Purpose Area 1, there is a point of contact for each of the purpose areas, and you're more than welcome to reach out.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the day.
Thank you.